Yeah, we were definitely looking at duplexes or a quad where one unit would be kept open. But as far as us living in it, the lifestyle that we're wanting is full-time travel. So if we were to stay in that open unit, it probably wouldn't be for a very long amount of time. So would it be possible to rent out the other units to as a landlord, and then the one that's kept open go through Airbnb or Verbo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would depend on the lender. If you're certain banks may have an issue with that, and there may be in the fine print there may be some stipulations that make that a potential. They call those non-monetary defaults, where if you do that and the bank wants to call the loan if they figure it out. But I would say that's a good game plan to have. I would probably seek a long-term tenant in one of the two units, and then reserve the other for your use when you're in town, and Airbnb it when you're not, and or whatever. There are some challenges with Airbnb properties right now, and that platform for me didn't work. It stopped working for me in 2022, and and it was partly driven by the pandemic, but also just a whole bunch of oversupply of Airbnb stuff. And it's been bad for a lot of neighborhoods. Also, you've got a bunch of neighborhoods now with a bunch of vacant houses because everybody rushed into that at the same time. But still, your point is creating a short-term rental opportunity. It would be a furnished place that would be your furniture, and you guys would use it, not book those dates when you wanted an investor in there or when you wanted an occupant in there, and be able to go. The bigger question is, how are you going to handle the water heater that breaks in the attic of the unit next door when you guys are in the van on the West Coast for 6 months?
We would definitely have to have someone local that we hire out to go reset the rooms after every guest and manage the things like that. And obviously that puts in another middleman, which doesn't maximize our profits from that, but it would be necessary.
There's even a worse potential problem than that, and we're going to talk about third-party corporate management at some point, and it's a challenging problem to have to address and overcome.
What's your experience been like with hiring out help, basically, to manage your properties?
Oh Lord, we don't have enough time. I've hired and fired 3 different corporate third-party management companies. One was a Century 21 franchisee, and they stole from us just blatantly. And they didn't steal from us by taking rents. They stole from us by allocating overhead to our properties they were billing us for painting this apartment or fixing this sink.
Wow.
The work was never done. And they got into trouble. The owner ended up going to jail for some fraud stuff that was similar to that. We were just a small part of this big picture fraud that was going on. But even the honest property management companies that we hired, and that actually was in Troy, by the way.
Really?
So, yes, and many years ago. But we have also used a couple corporate third-party management companies here in Montgomery, particularly when I was consulting a lot, and I've been all over mainly Southeast, acquiring raw land or existing apartment communities to renovate, reposition, and resell working for a larger company that was in the merchant development business, which meant they would buy stuff not to own indefinitely like I'm doing, but for a shorter haul of buying it, adding value to it by changing the management. I called it lipstick on a pig, just painting and planting flowers and then flipping it a year later and moving on to the next asset or investment opportunity. But relative to those periods of time when I was out of town a lot, I hired a couple of different local corporate management companies. And I mean, I would turn over my properties. They'd be full with a waiting list, and I'd get them back a year later, and there'd be 5 or 6 vacancies, and the market was still healthy. And it's like, what's the deal? And I would just get into it, and I would find out potentially a lot of times from potential tenants that, well, I scheduled 3 appointments to come look at a vacant apartment over there, and each time I showed up, nobody actually came to the property to show me the unit. It's like the level of professionalism with some of these companies was just like terrible. And I quickly realized, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm either going to have to be here or I'm going to have to find an individual manager that would be conscientious and worried about the same things I'm worried about, as opposed to worrying about their own bills and their own portfolio that might not be that successful from a cash flow standpoint, and having to supplement it by doing third-party management just to make a payday to supplement to pay for their overhead or their staffing.
I definitely would rather go through an individual that I trust rather than like a company where it's going to be a different person coming in every time. I would rather just hire out someone that I already know that's local to wherever we are buying a property at, or that I find and like we interview them or whatever, who can just do the housekeeping and maintenance for if it was an Airbnb property. If it's a long-term rental property, I'm sure that we can be in the U.S. for whenever that tenant leaves and do the reset of that on our own. But
well, you'll have to address maintenance response, emergency maintenance response also, and it's not that difficult to do it. I've done it one of two ways, and one way is to find a conscientious property manager, and I've had a couple of really good property managers. One of them was retired from a corporate job and just didn't want to sit around and watch TV, but wanted to work essentially full-time, part-time. Yeah. So I would have him available when I was out of town, and he would work 8-hour days, 9-hour days. He would actually be a first responder, and then he would be the one to decide, okay, I can fix this myself, or I need to pick up the phone and call a heating and air conditioning contractor or a plumber or whatever. And that worked out really well. And unfortunately, he got sick and died. Wow, not because of my job, but while he was working with us. And it was one of the hardest things for me to deal with, seeing his demise and decline, because he didn't want to admit it and recognize it. He had a cardiovascular disease, and he couldn't feel his legs, and he got to where he couldn't climb up ladders, but he was falling on the job, and I didn't want to take away anything from him, but it just, it was really a challenging part of my career. Younger people too, another really good hire that I found, and I knew it was going to be a short-term thing. It turned out to be 4 or 5 years, but he had graduated from college and had gotten a degree in a field that just wasn't a very lucrative field, and I think it was forestry maintenance, and his first 6 months in the real world, he was off chasing gypsy moths or something or other, and the first 30 or 60 days, it was the greatest job he ever had, because it was like April and May, and then come August, when the ticks and the snakes and the 108-degree heat and humidity, it wasn't quite as fun then, and he was making, I don't know, maybe $13, $14 an hour, and so with a college degree, but he was great, and he came on in the early 2000, well, actually, no, he came in around 2014 when YouTube was really starting to hit its stride, and he single-handedly eliminated a whole ton of maintenance expense, third-party maintenance expense. He'd go on YouTube, how do I change this faucet out? How do I change out this commode? It was great. It was great.
Yeah, those videos do, especially the ones that were posted a while ago, like 2014, they do really well.
Well, in summary of your question, if you are going to be reliant upon a corporate third-party management company to have success as a landlord, I would advise you against buying the asset.
Right.
It never works out. And it's not 100% their fault. Typically, a corporate management company will charge you 10% of their collections. And you would think that they would be incentivized to keep the property full, but that's just not enough of a monthly check to support a big payroll, and it's so the way that they justify it is they will take on a whole bunch of properties, and they'll try to allocate a $30,000 maintenance person over 4 or 5 different properties, and then get the benefit of that maintenance person for their own corporate portfolio as well. And you're always like playing second fiddle to their own assets.
Well, something I'm curious about. So you started your real estate career 40 years ago in the 80s, right? What are some of the most significant changes to the real estate industry since then? Like, what would you say is like some of the biggest differences that you've seen in the industry?
I think the ebb and flow of credit has been the main thing. I mean, when I got in the business, there were the 3 C's of lending, and it was collateral and credit and character, and that all went out the window in the 2000s with the subprime lending, and everybody was like trying to originate. All the lenders were trying to originate and package up as many loans as they could and then sell them to Wall Street as mortgage-backed securities, and everybody lost sight of the underlying economics of the whole business and the program, and that changed. And then the pendulum swung back to where, even if you had 25% down, if you didn't have an 815 credit score or established credit, or if you weren't at least 30 years old. I mean, it was never literally a stated thing, but to come in as a first-time investor would have probably ruled you guys out. So that's been the biggest change back and forth that I've seen. There's been some tax law changes. There was a tax act in '86. It was the Tax Reform Act, and I remember working 70, 80-hour work weeks for this corporate merchant developer because the tax law was going to take away the depreciation benefits for passive investors. In other words, you could be a doctor or a lawyer and you could invest into this partnership of 30 people, and you could qualify to take the depreciation offset against your active income from your doctor's practice or your dentist practice or whatever it was. And in '86, I don't even remember who, I think Reagan, Reagan did the Recovery Act of '81, and I think he was still president in '86. You guys wouldn't know because you weren't born then. But,
Weren't even thought.
And we were trying to get a bunch of deals done under the radar. They had to be done by December 31st, and we canceled Christmas that year. And then there was nothing. I mean, there was nothing to do for 4 or 5 years as everything adjusted and adapted to that. So, but if you pick a economically viable location and an asset that you care for, and you do preventive maintenance, and you don't let it run down into just a derelict property that you wouldn't live in or you wouldn't want your children to live in when you get to that point. I don't think that there's that. I mean, you always have the risk of, fire, but you have insurance for that. I mean, right. So I think it's a great, stable market. To me, I've done new construction and I've done acquisition and renovation of existing properties. I've always done better with the latter because there's less risk involved. When you buy a piece of dirt and you're going to go in there and you're going to build a 224 unit apartment complex, I've done a number of those. We did one in Nashville, and we're up there with the moving dirt with the very first stages of construction, and we hit rock, and we had to, it was $1 million problem. And that was my asset as an individual investor. I'd have been writing the check for the $1 million. And fortunately I was just a small part of a big cog, and we ended up overcoming that challenge, but it would have really been a problem. You can buy an existing property and all of the site work, all of the, the foundation, all the stuff that's all been done. The zoning risk, that's all been taken by somebody else. So I've always done better acquiring existing properties, and again, using a neighborhood that has a charm and an appeal of itself, and saying, okay, I'm marketing the lifestyle of that neighborhood. It just so happens that I'm doing it with an apartment that comes with that lifestyle. It's been a really good formula for me. And
we're definitely wanting to do low risk things. And I know that if we went and did the either Airbnb or focusing on college students, it would be higher risk. But that's the only reason that I would see us not doing that. Because we just kind of want easy,
a good compromise at least between.
Well, you guys have mentioned considering investing in student housing a couple of times, and I can give you two classic examples. I bought two different 16-unit properties. Y'all are living in one right now. It's one that has been one of the greatest. That asset has been the best asset I've ever owned. It was the first one I bought. It'd be the last one that I sell if and when I decide to retire or sail off into the sunset. But I also bought a 16-unit property where I went to college. And it was a completely different avatar. My tenant was even though we were getting them to sign 1-year leases, they would flunk out in 60 days or 90 days, and they would move out, and you'd have to chase them down, and they'd be out of state in a lot of cases. Right. They'd even be out of the country because we had a lot of foreign exchange students that would rent from us. And we found out that our tenants can tear stuff up in their sleep when they're students. And I'm like, I should have known that, because I remember some of the roommates that I had when I was renting in college, how hard they were, and we were as a group of tenants on the same buildings that I was then trying to rent out to somebody else. I should have known. But I got a call one day, hey, we got smoke billowing up from your unit at 125 University Avenue. It was like a quarter of a mile from campus. Can't go wrong. You're walking distance to campus, it's like a no-brainer, 16-unit property. And our foreign exchange students had decided to have a walk or a hibachi or something or other on our carpeted floor in the living room, and who would have thought it could have caught the place on fire? I mean, it's just... And so we sold that, and we lost a lot. I mean, that was a very risky transaction for us. So it's not just limited to new construction. There is some risk associated with certain types of property lifestyles that you're trying to, support or emulate or attract. And in my case, I've done better I've done young professional, and I've done kind of a single and mingle property, and those have all been successful. But I've done best with professionals of all ages, but more established professionals that just want, a lot of them make more money than I do, and they want to be able to lock the door on the weekends and drive to wherever, go to the beach, go to the mountains, do whatever, and not have to worry about mowing the grass and having exterior maintenance. They want to have somebody else do all that for them, and when they do come back on Sunday night, they've got a 50-hour work week ahead of them, and they want quiet and calm and serenity and tranquility. They don't want to be bothered by a bunch of music or people yelling and screaming. And so once you figure out who your avatar is and you develop a lifestyle around that avatar, I think that's another really good recipe for you'll get longer retention from your tenants. And turnover is, if you're in Colorado and you find out that you've got a tenant that's going to have to leave at the end of their lease, and that doesn't coincide with when you guys are going to be back from Colorado. Right. You're going to have to hire a team to respond to however that apartment is left, and in some cases they'll leave furniture in it. You got to move the stuff out, you got to paint, you got to clean, or you got to hire people to do that. So in my case, I would leave money on the table to have a lower rent and therefore a lower turnover, and to look for a more stable tenant in the type of lifestyle that I was trying to support with the apartment business plan that I had put together.
Right.
Well, to close us out, I think I have one question for you, and that's this. If you can think of one piece of advice or a mantra to repeat for young people that are looking to get into real estate, what would that be? What would you have? What would you tell us, for instance, to repeat to ourselves and push us forward into success?
My biggest regret in my real estate investing career is that I got over leveraged. And the reason I got over leveraged is I was trying to build up a portfolio to support a staff. In other words, I was trying to right size my portfolio. I had 13, 14, 15 people, and I want to make sure everybody had something to work on. And the 16 units in Troy I bought for that very reason. I had a young hire that I thought was really going to be a mover and shaker in the real estate business, and I wanted them to be engaged and not be bored like I was when I worked for the bank. And so I bought that property largely to kind of make my portfolio big enough to support a staff that I had, and I borrowed money to do it, and it was not a really smart thing to do. So never get over leveraged. If somebody offers you 100% financing, don't do it. If you've got the down payment, don't do it, and don't buy. I would have done better having a smaller portfolio and having a smaller staff to manage and operate that portfolio. Mm-hmm. So does that make sense?
Yeah, don't exceed your means, I guess you mean?
Well, I did it a couple of ways. I bought more real estate apartment assets than I probably should have, and I did it. I was motivated again to keep my staff challenged and occupied, and boy, having student tenants, it really kept us occupied, not in a productive way. But I also diversified the company also into. I had a construction company where we got into flipping homes, and the banks were saying, we'll give you 100% financing, 120% financing. So I'm like, okay, let's go out and buy 15 lots. And before I knew it, I had 23 unsold homes when 2008 hit, and I was like the interest payment was $60,000 a month because I was over leveraged. I had, at the time I remember thinking like, they're offering me 100% financing, and how can I not take that deal? And I felt like I would be lazy if I didn't take the opportunity to get into the home flipping or the spec house building. I should have stayed with my core business. You find something that you do well at and you enjoy doing it. And for me, it was buying existing apartments, renovating them, figuring out the lifestyle that I wanted to offer and trying to attract potential tenants to that lifestyle. And once I got them, I wanted to build a community in a community, which I've been very proud of being able to do that. And they stay there longer. So it's just a win-win cycle all the way around. Mm-hmm. And if I were at your stage in my life, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do exactly the same thing, but I wouldn't take on more debt than I should. I wouldn't buy more assets to fix it, to meet a staff need or a staffing need, and I wouldn't do third-party management, and I would stick with the apartments that I was doing the best with, and I wouldn't take on outside partners. Yeah. That's a whole other discussion for another day.
And no college kids.
College kids can tear up stuff in their sleep.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, very good. Thank you for having us today.
All right. Appreciate it. Have you paid your rent yet this month?
I'll get back to you on that.
Today's the 6th.